your view of the real world. And the real world includes your relationships with the real people in your life. The Dajjal, for example, has sabotaged the relationship of most of the West's children in the past 50, 60 years with their parents. Created a whole massive revolution in Western society called conflict of generations between parents and children. And did it with the most irrelevant kind of people. Rock stars. And other so-called artists.
Yeah, that is a major Hollywood theme, like the rebel without a cause.
Yeah, and many other similar memes. A whole family of memes about infecting young children with the rebelliousness against their parents. The very people who love them and nourish them and feed them and care for them, the only people who have the children's best interest at heart. And this is, of course, sabotage. It's a sabotage of Western society. And ultimately, of course, those memes spread to the rest of the planet because that rebellious music mimetics eventually spread to every culture and language.
Some teenagers would say that, well, how can they not rebel against their parents if their parents have fed them BS their whole life, if their parents have lied to them, told them things that weren't
true. They
didn't. But the teenager feels that.
But that's the teenager. What are you talking about? Which lies?
That's something I hear very commonly from
Which part? Which part?
Well, for example, like about wars, or about the country, that the parents tell them that, they should respect the country, but then they decide, and they should but then they discover that American history is full of crap. That a lot of wars were just deceitful excuses. This was something major in the rebellion of
But that's not reason to rebel against your parents.
Well, they associate their parents with authority.
You can disagree with them. You don't have to rebel against them and hate their gods.
The idea is that the parents represent an authoritarian...
The parents have no authority whatsoever in war. America goes to war because...
The parents have the authority over the children.
What authority? To feed them and clothe them and take them to the bus and school every day, pay for their books?
Discipline them.
Discipline them from what? Putting their head in the oven? This is exactly how mimetics works. It's completely imagined. In fact, you yourself are being absorbed and dragged into that imaginary world of parental tyranny. There's nothing to it. When you actually start unraveling that imagined tyranny, that supposed oppression of the parents, you find nothing but chaff. Nothing but whirlwind and rumors. In most cases, I'm sure there are parents out there who are crazy nuts, but come on.
I think that might contribute if you have a lot of parents. Even if it's 3-4% of the population, you have parents who...
exceptionalism. Let's not get dragged in there, please. 3-4% did not make society. And I doubt it is even 3-4%. At least back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Now it's single parents and all that. It's a different situation.
Back then, you may have had cases of incest and parental physical
but this was widespread across the board. So it's apples and oranges. This was 99% of the children, of the youth. What do they got to do with incest or oppression or tyranny of parents? Their average parents try to raise their kids and do the best they can. In fact, you're doing it again. You're indulging in the same kind of imagined world that is completely fictional. It's all in your head, not in the reality that Allah created. And so, not to belabor the whole topic, maybe inshallah at another time we can pick it up from a different angle. But this brings us to the next step in this idea about mimetics. And that we mentioned two words a few times over and over here and there. One is reality. And as Muslims, we believe that this world, the real world, and not the one in your head or my head, the real world is created by Allah through His speech. He said, be, and it is. That's the real world. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't change it.
It exists. It is.
It exists as the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. We are part of it. We are in it. And so are all our relationships and everything else that is real. Now, superposed on that world is a fictional world. It's in our head. Now, as Muslims, we are invited, we are commanded to do what? What's the command for us?
To surrender.
To surrender and submit. What does it mean to submit to the will of Allah?
It's a very good question. One could say that it means to make our will try to conform with the will of Allah, to find out what God wants us to do in a given situation and do it ourselves.
To submit.
Right.
To submit. So, for example, let's see how we can approach this in a way that unravels the whole topic in one fell swoop instead of making a complicated conversation. So you mean submit like obey? Is that what you mean? You're
I think that would be one.
But where does submission start? Before you obey, before you do anything, what must you first do before you can even obey and act?
Surrender.
Surrender. Well, what does that involve? Surrender. How do you surrender to Allah? You cannot see Him. He's not. He's not standing over you and waiting for you to. How do you surrender?
Opposition.
How do you oppose Allah?
Well,
how could you even begin to oppose Allah?
In your heart is you can.
What does that mean? Oppose. That's a very, very philosophical term. In real terms, what does it mean?
If there's something that is a divine commandment and you choose not to do it, in a sense.
Look, let's obey. But before obedience, you must accept. To submit and surrender, the very first thing you must do is accept. To accept.
Accept terms?
Accept the will of Allah. For example, if you're healthy, you accept it.
Right.
If you're not, you accept it. You can do something about it after the fact, but first you must accept your present real condition. Healthy or not, strong or not, tall or short, fat or thin, white or black. You must accept it, fully accept it in your heart. This is how the situation is now. That's submitting. You submit to Allah when you accept what situation Allah has put you in.
Okay.
You understand? And to accept it is to accept the will of Allah in the world is to accept the reality, the real world as it is. To start from there. Now what does that mean? It means you must put aside all your fictions, all your delusions about the world and the people in it. You must put them aside. You must throw away your will, your fictions, your imaginations, throw them out, pitch them away, and accept what it is that Allah has created in the real world. That's what it means to be a Muslim. That's the beginning of Islam, of submission. Now, if you don't do this, what happens? What happens if you don't accept reality as it is, and you start to indulge in delusions?
Well, by definition, being delusional is a mental